If we are victorious and I live, I will thank the Lord for his favor and help in our defense. But we mortals must do our parts as well. Fight with honor, and all will be well.
On July 27, 1214, in the county of Flanders, the Battle of Bouvines took place close to the town of Bouvines. It was the last engagement of the 1213 to 1214 Anglo-French War. Ferdinand, Infante of Portugal and Count of Flanders, asked Philip II, King of France, to restore the cities of Aire-sur-Lolis and Saint-Omer to him in 1214 as a result of the Treaty of Pont-Aven. He therefore renounced Philip and put together a large coalition that included Duke Henry I of Brabant, Count William I of Holland, Duke Theobald of Lorraine and Duke Henry III of Limburg, in addition to Emperor Otto IV, King John of England and Duke Henry I of Brabant. John, who served as the alliance's center of gravity, organized the operation. He intended to entice the French away from Paris and keep them engaged while the main army, led by Emperor Otto IV, advanced on Paris from the north. John's plan was first carried out, but the northern allies proceeded slowly. John fled to Aquitaine on July 3 after 2 skirmishes with the French. Philip had a force of 7,000 knights and 15,000 troops on the 23rd of July after calling his vassals to battle. Even though John was not among them, the emperor ultimately managed to concentrate his forces at Valenciennes, and in the meantime, Philip had countermarched north and reorganized. Now Philip was in charge of the attack, and on July 27, on the plain east of Bouvines and the river Marque, he decided to act after maneuvering to secure favorable terrain for his horsemen. Otto was taken aback by the enemy's quickness and believed to have been caught off guard by Philip, who most likely purposefully enticed Otto into his trap. Otto made the decision to assault the French rearguard at the time. The Allied army was arranged with the heavy cavalry on the wings and the infantry in a single, voluminous mass in the center, both of which were reinforced by a cavalry corps commanded by Otto himself. The army was facing southwest toward Bouvines. A similar configuration was used by the French army, which was composed of infantry, which included town militias, in the center and cavalry on the wings. In order to position himself behind the warriors on foot, Philip took the cavalry reserve and the royal banner, the oriflamme. The priest to Philip during the conflict, William the Breton, claimed that the men were lined up in a space of 40,000 steps, which leaves extremely little room and encourages hand-to-hand combat. 150 light cavalrymen from the Abbey of Saint-Médard de Soissons attacked the Flemish knights on the Allied left to disperse them at the start of the conflict. The unarmed riders were quickly driven off by the Flemish knights. Flemish knights broke from their lines and pursued the light cavalry that was fleeing. 180 French knights from Champagne assaulted the overbearing Flemish knights one after the other, killing or seizing them. The French were forced to retreat as the Count of Flanders launched a counterattack with all 600 of his knights. The Flemish force was attacked by Gaucher de Chatillon's 30 knights, followed by 250 more. They launched a series of charges continuously, stopping the Allied advance. In the initial battle, several knights from both sides were thrown from their mounts. The Allied lines were thinner when they were attacked by the dense French hordes because the French were more organized than the looser-formed Flemish knights. Through the lines of their Flemish rivals, Chatillon and Melun with their knights then whirled and hit them from behind, continuously changing their targets. No captives were taken during the grueling battle that St. Pol's knights and the Burgundians waged against the Flemings. The Duke of Burgundy's horse was slain, and he was flung on the ground, but he was saved by his knights, who drove the Flemish away and got him a new mount. Despite their increasingly dire circumstances, the Flemings continued to fight for 3 hours out of respect for their knightly honor. 2 French knights eventually seized the wounded and unmounted Count of Flanders, which caused his knights' morale to crumble. In front of Philip's knights and the fleur-de-lis flag, the 2,150-strong French urban militia troops were collected beneath the oriflamme in the center of the formation. They were assaulted and driven back by Allied knights and troops led by Otto not long after they had deployed. When French warriors stopped Otto and his knights, they were on the verge of reaching the French monarch. The Allied infantrymen burst through to Philip and his few knightly allies, unhorsing him with their hooked pikes. The French king's armor prevented an opposing lance from striking him, thereby saving his life. A knight provided Philip a new horse, and Gales de Montigny signaled for assistance using the royal banner. Through gaps in helmets and other weak areas in armor, the Allied soldiers stabbed unmounted French knights with daggers. In doing so, the French suffered significant losses and the Norman knight Etienne de Longchamp was slain. The Allies were forced to retreat after many French counterattacks and a protracted battle. The combat in the center had devolved into a brawl between the 2 mounted reserves commanded by the king and the emperor himself. Otto and his horse were nearly caught by the French knight Pierre Mauvoisin. And Gerard Latruille stabbed the emperor with a knife that rebounded off his coat of mail and struck Otto's horse in the eye, killing it. 4 German lords and their followers rescued Otto. He fled the field as the French dispatched additional knights to assault him directly. The German knights battled to the death or were captured to rescue their ruler. The French knights grabbed the imperial standard with the eagle and dragon and handed it to their monarch. The Allied resistance in the center had stopped at this point.
The enemy general is fallen! Our general is under attack!
Meanwhile, on the French left, forces headed by William Longuespeed pushed Robert de Dreux's troops. The English men fled when William Longuespeed was dismounted and taken prisoner by Philip of Dreux, Bishop of Beauvais. 12 enemy flags were taken by Matthew de Montmorency.
Back to the fight! turns in our favor. Favor. The enemy refuses to admit defeat. Their unit has run. Today we will add another triumph to the history of our people's greatness. Yes, we are outnumbered, but so what? All we need to do is keep our heads, and we will have victory. Make ready for the fight!
When the French started to close their wings inward to block the withdrawal of the Imperial center, the outcome of the day was already in their favor. The famous stand of former vassal of King Philip Reginald of Boulogne, who organized a ring of 400 to 700 Brabançon pikemen, brought the conflict to an end. While Reginald repeatedly made sorties with his tiny troop of knights, they repelled every attempt by the French cavalry to attack them. Long after the Imperial army had fled, an attack led by Thomas de Saint Valery, consisting of 50 knights and 1,000 to 2,000 men, finally captured the Brabant Schiltern. In the chaos, Reginald was captured. Due to the looming darkness and concern that the captives would break out, there was no pursuit. The conflict put a stop to Otto and John's threats. As his citizens lined the streets to welcome the victorious monarch, Philip triumphantly marched his captive prisoners behind him in a lengthy parade as he arrived back in Paris. Otto withdrew to his fortress in Harzburg after the fight, and Frederick II, who had already been acknowledged as emperor in the south a year and a half earlier, quickly overthrew him as Holy Roman Emperor. Following his loss, Count Ferdinand was kept in jail, and King John was able to negotiate an extremely lenient 5-year ceasefire. The political climate in England was significantly impacted by Philip's resounding triumph. The conflict put an end to all hopes for the Angevin Empire's revival. The defeated King John was so outmatched that he eventually had to yield to his barons' demands and accept the Magna Carta, which limited the power of the monarch and laid the foundation for common law.